we're going to keep competing together. So democracy can be co-opted, right, in ways that by groups that don't necessarily believe in democracy, but that can, so we're seeing this kind of populist, pseudo-democratic initiative that, yes, may be feeling like democracy because there are elections and votes, but aren't movements that necessarily subscribe to the fundamentals of democracy, which allow for, you know, a civil discourse and participation opinion. I think the problem for me, though, in all of this is that we've seen this before, right? It's not like fascism is new. We thought we had moved past it. I think what's tragic is we've realized that humans are much more vulnerable to this, that we don't necessarily evolve beyond it, that we're equally you know, susceptible to fascism as we were years before. But technology is complicit in exacerbating that. And we have to really look at that question. How are the tech platforms complicit in this? Are the business models of companies like Facebook actually incentivized to the polarization of society? And if so, is that okay on our watch to allow that? Is that okay being here in America to allow for Facebook to do that? Facebook, as we've said time and again, has become a crime scene. Yet we don't have the apparatus to hold them accountable. We give them a $5 billion fine and their stock price goes up. So we're all here at Sundance talking about how we want to do things. We're in 2020, in the most important country in the world in terms of its influence, and we're about to watch the same thing happen again, and we're helpless. So, thanks for coming.
So that's Karim's offbeat assessment. Let me turn to Maria. I mean, obviously, you're with Rappler. We followed, you know, painfully watching what's happening, the intimidation, and it was described so well in Ramona Diaz's film in 1,000 Cuts. And you have a very particular view of how technology has also amplified and distorted the situation.
I think it's the core of the problem, right? It is an accelerant. It is designed to work at our worst traits as human beings, to inflame anger and fear so that you create an us against them. So it is in the design of the platforms themselves. And then you add to that another layer of companies like Cambridge Analytica, and they're not alone. We have several of them in the Philippines. Think about it, the most number of compromised accounts in the Cambridge Analytica scandal are here in the United States. But the country with the second most compromised accounts are the Philippines. We are your dystopian future. Hopefully you don't get the deaths that we have, but if we do not fix this information ecosystem, if information warfare continues, and the war is against you, right? Take it personally because we are being manipulated. And we know this firsthand in Rappler. This is the first time all 4 founders of Rappler have traveled outside together. And because we believe it is truly important to move us to act against this. It is about the amount of data that has been gathered, how that has been weaponized and put in service, yes, of advertisers, that's the first step, but then the next step is it was taken over to manipulate us. And we don't need to have a ton. The Hillary film said it's only 60,000 to 80,000 people to get manipulated. In the Philippines, we watched in a short period of time how our society was polarized. We didn't have the same deep divisions. Your divisions here weren't as deep before the social media platforms came in. So I think that's the root of the problem. The difference, I think, between the Great Hack and Rappler is we were the target. And in 2016, we had a 3-part propaganda war series where we questioned how the algorithms of Facebook impacted democracy. In 2019, you have Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project saying that cheap arguments on social media are rolling back democracy in at least 70 countries around the world. That includes your country and my country. So what do? You realize you're being manipulated. It's the first step. And then the second step is take control. We have to keep going back in the battle for truth. Because this is a battle for facts. It's like saying, oh, there are 1,000 people here in this room. If you say that 1,000,000 times, people outside will think there are 1,000 people in this room, because even though we're telling you the truth, there are only 3 of us. So how do we prevent that? How do we prevent a lie told 1,000,000 times from becoming a fact? How do we prevent a lie laced with anger and hate from becoming a fact? So that's a crucial problem for us, and what we've done in Rappler is to stand up against it, to go back to the facts, to realize that without the facts you can't have truth, without truth you can't have trust. Without any of these, democracy is dead. Anger management.
Bridgit, to a situation where we are promoting narratives that are based in truth. What is the sort of the psychology behind it? What are you at Pop Culture Collaborative doing? Because I know you've got this framework of 3 meta-narratives. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we put out there and then sort of talk over our shoulders in order to get into a really good comment about how to build something new. One is, we have the habit of talking about changing the narrative, and I am going to say again and again and again that we need to let go of that language and instead put ourselves to the task of asking how we actually transform whole narrative environments. And by that, I mean this. If I was to say, imagine a big, big vat of water, and that water was the color green. And you had a vial of food coloring, those tiny little cute vials that we use to make cupcakes and such, right? And I said, I want you to put a drop of your pink food coloring into this vat of green water. And you did, what would happen? That pink would swirl for one tiny little second, and if I stirred, even gently, that pink drop would be quickly consumed by the green, and that vat of water would continue to be a green vat of water. And in reality, we are all like that green vat of water. We are surrounded every day not by one story that we engage with on the radio or in a book or a film. We are actually surrounded by dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of stories, culture, things we hear from our family, the books we read in school, the things we speak about when we're in faith-based situations, etc., all swirling around us. And then I think mostly inside of the social justice nation, holding our food coloring vials, which are messages and press releases and op-ed, and we say, this is a nation of immigrants, drop. And we drop that into a narrative ocean that has hundreds of years of ideas and mental models and stories that reinforce that we're not, for instance, in states that was founded on the principles of welcoming all people and all migrants. We are a nation that was founded on very different, deeply exclusionary principles. And so where does that drop go? It gets consumed by these deep ideas that we hold, and it gets remixed into that deeper legacy of narratives and ideas and mental models. And we start, again, as a social justice community, from scratch. And so at the Collaborative, one of the things that we have come to realize is that as a grant maker and trying to understand how to support a pop culture narrative change field, that we have to sort of lose the idea that a single story that are deeply related to each other and talking and call and responding with each other all hold this. They're about introducing entirely how this case over the landscape of stories and narratives and question how our stories are connected. We tend to be lauded for how our stories are distinct from one another, but we have to begin to say, how does my story interact with Toni's story and all of these other stories, the interactions day to day with one another, that all of these ideas are reinforcing and modeling pluralism in. And so one of the ideas that we are experimenting with is this question of how do you create stories and ecosystems of stories that hold very different ideas, that carry those ideas far and wide. And what ideas are those that actually would, over time, create first a deep yearning in millions and millions of people to build a pluralist culture, and then ultimately allow stories to be the guide for people to begin to behave differently and actually make real pluralist societies. And that's where we've landed ourselves. That is our inquiry, and one that I think is actually very timely for artists and researchers and strategists and activists and funders to be engaged with collectively.
I want to turn to you now. And when we look at the film Softie, it's focused on an individual who's trying to affect change. And talk to us a little bit about the kind of inspiration behind the story of Boniface Mwangi. Maybe for those of you who've not seen the film, just give us a tiny synopsis, why his story was so inspiring and hopeful, and then how you expect that to translate into the wider change, perhaps, that we want to see in Kenyan society.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you for having us here. It's an amazing opportunity to be able to share our stories with all of you and connect, and looking forward to engaging the Q&As with the audience. Before I dive into Softie, I just wanted to pick up on the idea of interconnectedness, because in Karim's film, The Great Hack, what Kenya was quoted as one of the examples of countries where Cambridge Analytica had done quite a bit of work in 2013. The incumbent president, Uhuru Kenyatta, his political party's ideologies, his entire political party's campaign were designed by Cambridge Analytica. And that's mentioned quite a bit in The Great Hack. So I think one thing that I think is very important when we're thinking about stories is that just because a story happens in a far-flung place, it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. We are all interconnected as human beings, yeah, across the world. So I think that was something that I just really wanted to start off with. And just to give you a little summary about the film Softie. So Softie is a documentary directed by Sam Soko that's about Boniface Softie Mwangi. He's a very outspoken Kenyan activist. And he's an activist in a country, Kenya, where activism is looked at as kind of a dirty thing. You're not allowed to break ranks. You're supposed to fall in line. But because of Softie's difficult background, because of Softie's work as a news photojournalist, after that, after the post-election leaders ended up signing a peace treaty, shaking hands and moving past the election that had happened, but people had been affected on the ground. And this took Boniface Softie Mwangi on a path towards activism, because he decided to take his photos across the country to election hotspots to make sure that people saw what they had done to each other, make sure people had seen themselves, and to be able to confront what they were capable of, and to be able to figure out a way, how can we not do this again? And he decided to run for a political seat in 2017. He didn't win, but the film isn't specifically about his political campaign. The film is about the cost of activism to a certain degree, and exploring how can you be able to balance your love for country with your love for family. So that's what the film goes into. We feel that this film is universal because it explores the idea that the personal is political, yeah, and you can't divorce yourself. You can't say that because I have a family and because I have to pay my mortgage, I have to pay my rent, I can't be involved in politics. Because there's a lot of apathy in our country, and I feel that there's a lot of apathy in the world, thinking that politicians, that multinationals are the ones that control everything, that we don't have any power. And the film explores the idea of love for your country, you know? There are different ways in which you can express that. Boniface expresses that through his activism. His wife expresses that through raising their kids and being there for them. And we feel that that's an important message that we would like to share with the world, and also share with Kenya. In terms of the impact that we would like the film to have in Kenya. We don't have a culture, and I don't know if this is across the world, but we don't have a culture of telling the complete stories and looking at how everything is interconnected. I know in America you have the culture of breaking news. Like there's always breaking news. So you're in a state of panic. You're like, oh my God, something's always happening. What am I going to fix? So you become kind of paralyzed. Softie is the first time that we've been able to talk about our history. Where did the idea of negative ethnicity, which is a problem in Kenya, the idea of tribes, aligning across tribes, where did that come from? Boniface is like a student of history, so he does talk about in the film about like how the concept of tribes, the concept of negative ethnicity was created during colonial rule when differences between different tribes were amplified, and weaponized, and that was something that was carried forward by successive governments because it was the easiest way. And I think you kind of have the same thing in America with your political parties. It's the easiest way. When people focus on their differences, they don't understand that coming together is the way they'll be able to solve things. So that's what we want the film to explore.
Fantastic, thank you. And that brings us kind of full circle in a way, because for those of you that haven't seen this film, you must see it. It's absolutely fantastic. But it brings us full circle in a way, in that, and a number of on the panel, I think have talked about the universality of some of these issues. Karim, you talked about the US. This is something that is pan-national, is universal, and is international. And you've experienced the same, Maria, you've experienced its nature universal. This doesn't stop at Washington. I'm going to retailer, the journalist, the person who is reporting and speaking about these issues, and the activist. And in a way, Boniface combines both, but that's quite an unusual thing. And I'm just wondering about how we get, storytellers are often not the best activists, and perhaps they shouldn't be. Who wants to start?
I'm going to jump in because I think, correct me, it's unclear what the facts are. Journalism is activism. And part of the reason we've around the world, the reason we've done that is we've got to the plate right now. So the facts matter. Normally you're bored by them, right? I mean, facts are really boring. And then here comes this landscape that actually rewards the lies. In the old days, when we were the scale that it is today, we're on the defensive.
Because
so,
you had a feeling of responsibility beyond profit.
Yes,
I mean, the
that's
core
correct.
of this is about capitalism. And let's just call it what it is. Let's just stop spinning around it. And I know that may be complicated because we need capitalism to also get patronage for things like Sundance. But this is the reality. Yes, we are a karma dry cleaning operation here. Your sins and come back and you clean it in the mountains of this beautiful place. But that's the system we're in, right? And so, I mean, sorry, it's been a rough week. I don't know. I think what upsets me is that we sit here and we talk about human rights and values and democracy, but the reality is that we still don't live in a world where we value human life at the same level. Like we don't live in a world talking about interconnectedness. We don't give a damn about what happens in the Philippines and America. Let's be real. We don't actually care. We don't think that it affects us at all. We don't view that when democracy is squashed in one part of the globe, it affects us. Somehow, our spaceship Earth doesn't have that interconnection that we'd like to think it does, right? So we do sometimes, you can see an image, talking about storytelling, the image of the Amazon burning captures the world. Oh my God, that's going to affect me, right? Especially the white world. Like, oh my God, that's going to affect us. The Amazon's burning, the Amazon's burning. But Syria burning, no, right? So somehow human life doesn't resonate. The image of human life dying, millions of people being displaced, does trees burning get the attention of white people, especially in this country. So, and I'm not saying that trees don't matter, they do. But what I want to dare us to dream of is a world where we actually show up for these values, where we actually view human life being equal, no matter where it is, where we actually view democracy being important no matter where it is, where we actually, because if we do that, then I think we can continue to inspire the world. But currently, our hypocrisy and the cost of that hypocrisy is what allows for fascism to be so contagious, because they see how how especially in this empire of America, how even when we had Obama, we were still not able to do that, right? So I think we have to dare to dream further if we really want to live in that world. And back to slogan, I would say, we gotta hit them with, we're all in it together. Because that's what it comes down to. We're all in it together. I don't know if that's as catchy as your mates in the UK, but that's what I would say. Because that's what it comes down to. We have to remind them of, like, you can hate me, but you're stuck with me. You know what I mean? And I'm stuck with you. So how do we figure this out? You know what I mean? So that's...
Yeah. I think the Pop Culture Collaborative was founded with a really particular vision to create the kind of common ground between movements and the entertainment industry, and which isn't just telling a story, and it isn't just building a movement, it's actually looking and really interrogating the role of storytelling in the process of advancing cultural change. And inviting activists and artists to be in the conversation about how culture changes and how their particular contributions are advancing particular culture change goals. And what we've seen is that when you don't assume that these are two very, very distinct independent sectors, but that actually we're creating a new field in which people share some sensibilities. So we have, activists like Ai-jen Poo and Rishad Robinson who actually deeply understand the nature of stories. They don't claim to be filmmakers, etc., but they do. They have spent years learning how to be in deep dialogue with filmmakers and television showrunners and others in order to sort of enliven the creative process of those artists. And similarly, if you look, for instance, at the relationship that Ai-jen Poo formed with Alfonso Cuarón around Roma, Alfonso actually has a much deeper, incredibly nuanced understanding of the domestic worker rights movement as a result of this collaboration. And it is through investing in those collaborations, real time, getting messy, rolling up sleeves and trying to tell authentic, accountable, and deeply engrossing, artful stories that we are building actually a new field, a culture change field, in which people do actually share methodology and sensibility about creative process and about movement strategy. And one really great example of that, of how bringing these worlds together and asking people to grapple with the work together happened when we've been involved in a process of designing a narrative system, which is a framework that helps our community to work together over time to transform a narrative environment. So we worked with a senior fellow who helped to create that framework, and with all of our grantees to really identify a number of mental models that we felt could, if socialized broadly across culture, realize pluralism at scale in the US. And one of those ideas, which came because activists and artists were sitting down and listening to each other, was, activists, particularly those in immigration space, said, the scarcity mindset, which is a very, very powerful mental model in American culture at least, and perhaps other places as well, is one of the most significant roadblocks we face to having a productive conversation about a world where just migration is real. And in movement spaces, we tend to think and we try to counter that scarcity mindset with arguments about resources. And we talk about how immigrants contribute to society, and we talk about we have enough room, and we quantify sort of human beings and human contribution in ways that actually, quite frankly, work against us. But then we took this problem of the scarcity mindset to creative strategists, cultural strategists, and